So I first say good morning to Dr. Rudin. I thank you for carving out some time to spend with me in this interview.
Thanks for having me.
For our listeners and viewers, um, let me introduce to you Dr. David Rood, who has more than 30 years of federal government service with experience in talent development, organizational leadership, human resources, financial management, administrative operations, and international relations. So, if I may be able to call you Dave, if that's okay
Of
with
course.
you.
Yeah.
So, Dave, as with you presently serving as the Chief Learning Officer for NNSA, describe for us and help us to understand your primary role for preparing minority serving institutions students to enter into the federal government workforce.
Okay. Thank you for that question. Before I answer, I have to ask the audience one question as a follow-on from yesterday. What does NNSA stand for? Yes, thank you. I was worried yesterday. Y'all are quick studies. So in my role as, first of all, can you all hear me? Yes. Okay. In my role as Chief Learning Officer, it's overseeing the whole learning and development portfolio for NNSA. But one of the things that I and NNSA are really focused on is building the future generations. Future generations of leaders, of STEM professionals, because as I mentioned yesterday, that is so integral to our mission. We have been involved and partnering with about 39 minority servicing institutions for the past several years, and most recently expanded to include Hispanic servicing institutions, in addition to our HBCU foundation, as well as tribal colleges. And so it's really a program to, again, build the leaders of tomorrow, and to sustain a pipeline that is representative of our society, and to embrace diversity in all of its facets, and to really provide those who have not had those same opportunities in the past to promote avenues and forums and ways to make that more accessible to everyone, and especially targeting those that haven't had those opportunities in the past.
Yes. And when you reference to those who have not had that opportunities in the past, are you specifically referring to minorities?
Yes, minorities.
Well, David stated that for the first time in the history of the federal government, we're now seeing at least 5 different generations in the workforce. What do you think are some challenges for minority serving institutions in preparing minorities to enter into the federal government? So, with this whole emphasis on soft skills, what have you learned over your 38 years of experience, and what is needed to actually prepare the students, not for the technical piece, but being able to navigate in the workforce with soft skills?
Yes, so 4 or 5 generations in the workplace, unprecedented. And so you automatically have that kind of diversity in the workplace, from people who could have retired 15 years ago but just love the job so much, or for other reasons haven't.
Sure.
To I started my federal career between my junior and senior year in high school. Back then it was a vocational office trainee program. So I think the workforce has morphed into a more diverse workforce, not just generationally, ethnically. The U.S. demographics have become much more diverse over the past 10, 15, 20 years especially. And so I think that is helping in terms of promoting, diversity in again, all of its facets. And the thing about soft skills, does that really
Yes.
get the question, is I think it was Al who said it yesterday, or I may have not attributed it to the right person, but someone said It's the hard skills that get you in the door. It's the soft skills that keep you with having a job. And I'm paraphrasing. And it's a both and. You need the hard skills. You know, you need to bring your physics background or your chemistry background and apply it to solving the problems of society and to making the world a better place to live. And to do that, you need the soft skills. So I, at the risk of oversimplifying it, characterize the hard skills as the what and the soft skills as the how. So I have seen people in my career who were the best at what they did, but had they couldn't get their way out of a paper bag in terms of their soft skills. They couldn't deal with anybody effectively. And when you don't have good soft skills, the thing that suffers most is your reputation and your credibility and being trustworthy. And if you don't have that in the workplace, it doesn't matter how brilliant you are. No one's going to work with you. You become the pariah. And it's not because of your ethnicity or your race or the color of your skin. It's about who you are as a person. And so we definitely want to, and I'm so glad that there's this kind of a soft skills workshop in conjunction with as part of the Minority Servicing Institution Partnership Program, because it's essential to learn those skills early on, even before you begin your career or certainly at the outset of your career.
But Dave, also at the same time, many of our minority students want to continue to be original and authentic while they are matriculating at their college university. That may not work in the federal government workforce, to be who you are and use the same language and have the same personality and be outgoing and very verbal. What is needed? What can you tell these students that they need to do? What soft skills do they actually need to work on? So when they go to HR, when they're going to that interview, knowing that that panel will be looking and examining their soft skills, what can you identify maybe the top 5 to 7 soft skills that they need to master prior to applying for their job?
I hesitate using the word master because soft skills is a continual learning journey. And so you'll always be learning, continual learning, continual growth. I was in Dr. Wana's session yesterday, and she talked about grit, growth, resilience, integrity, and tenacity, and that really stuck with me.
Sure.
And soft skills is part of that. In addition to having the grit, the drive, the internal motivation to succeed and to take you to wherever your career goals and dreams take you.
Sure.
I do believe that a key soft skill is being authentic and genuine. No one's asking you to not be who you are. There are norms in the federal government about what is acceptable conduct. I mean, we've unless we've been living in a cave, we know all the the Me Too movement, harassment of any kind, zero tolerance in the federal government. I've actually fired people, and they say it's hard to impossible to fire someone in the federal government. I've had to fire people for that kind of misconduct as recently as last week. They were just over the top in terms of, harassment, and it just went on, and it's like, okay, you're out. So authenticity, emotional intelligence is a huge soft skill, because that's also the convergence of other soft skills, the interpersonal skills, the ability to have meaningful, positive, healthy relationships. And let me just ask, when you hear someone being emotional, or they're described as, he's just being emotional, is that typically viewed in a good light? No. So what they're really saying is the emotions have taken over this person. the emotions are holding the person hostage, and they're just having a field day. But emotional intelligence is not about parking emotions to the side, because number one, you can't. They're always there. It's how you use your emotions in a productive way. So, and what does that mean varies by the individual in terms of if you're in a situation, or let's say you're in a meeting at work and something is really just grating on your nerves, an inappropriate response would be just to just explode. And so they're being emotional. But you can also, you want to tap into yourself in terms of figuring, okay, what's really going on here? Why am I in this agitated state? And you're having this conversation with yourself. You're labeling the emotions you're feeling. You're trying to figure out what's going on, and then what is the appropriate response? And not to call her out, but when I was talking with Dr. Michelle the other day, she said, when something really gets on my nerves, I'll leave the meeting. And sometimes you need that mental break. Did I get that right?
I won't leave a meeting, but I will leave work.
Yeah.
If I get that emotional, I will not show it. I will just, because I think about the consequences, I will just leave and
Right.
just, make up something and just leave the place until I get myself together.
Because when you're in an emotionally agitated state, you actually need the time to slow down, just as Dr. John was talking about listening. You got to listen to yourself. And that takes, you got to slam on the brakes and figure out what is going on here. But let's not forget that emotions are also very positive. There's happiness, there's joy, there's satisfaction, there's elation, all of that. And so emotions, the bottom line about soft skills is let the emotions work for you,
Sure.
not against you. Yeah. That's the shortcut. Communication. I loved it when this lady over here yesterday got her pop quiz of soft skills, 3 soft skills beginning with the letter C, right? And so the communication, the partnering, the collaboration, and listening. I loved, as Dr. John talked about, we've all been to courses or classes on reading, on speaking, and on writing. Who's been to a class on listening? And so the art of listening is absolutely essential. And then, paraphrasing it, and this is what I heard. So you're giving that speaker, the attention and the respect that, I've dialed in. I dropped the bags and I've dialed in. I'm all into what you're saying.
So Dave, let's dig a little deeper here. As you're doing a great job providing us with some tools, some things to consider in the workforce. Share with us some of those special experiences you've had to encounter, a pitfall or a challenge where you've had to deal with some things in the workforce with over the past 38 years.
You keep reminding me how long I have.
I'm trying to give them hope, longevity,
Yes.
longevity.
I joke that I started before the child labor laws kicked in. So yeah, I'll share a story where I just blew it. I was a division chief in an office that managed leadership development programs for the Department of Defense. And the director was very biased. She had her teachers' pets. She had her in-clique. She made no bones about it. I was not part of the in-group. There were about 3 people who were like all that really mattered in the organization out of a workforce of about 30, 35 people. So she retired. I'm thinking, yay, she retired. And I applied for the job. I got the job. So now I'm the director of this organization. And I spent the better part of the first 3 months overtly disparaging my predecessor. about the discord that she had created, the negative culture. Every time someone mentioned her name, I would be rolling my eyes, or this, that, and the other. It was just completely dismissive. And then, out of nowhere, someone walked into my office, shut the door, and called me on it. And said, "You think you might be helping the organization, but you're actually creating deeper divides, because you're not leading. You're actually continuing the dysfunctional practices of your predecessor, just in a slightly different way, and you're discrediting all the work that was done." And that was just like a punch in the gut, so to speak. And it was, you know, a rude awakening. And so, you know, I organized a team building offsite, brought in an external facilitator. And the last day, I told people I was strapping on the Kevlar vest. I sat dead in the middle of the room and I said, "Have at it." And it came at me in terms of what I was doing wrong, how I was disenfranchising people, creating low morale, and, you know, I had to really learn from that. And so it was largely unsolicited advice, although I sort of, again, sat in the middle of the room asking for it. So I was like a target. And they realized that some of the problems in the organization, in fact, many, were the result of my predecessor, but I wasn't helping matters with my approach. So my soft skills were not, that was not my finest moment in terms of soft skills, because it was negative communication, negative messaging on my part. It was not using it as opportunity to actually right the ship. But in that immediate phase when I began the job, I thought I was doing the right thing, but it was like I had blinders on. So it was a powerful learning moment for me of, you have to, in any position, you know, the lady who'd rather be the director, everybody in this room is a leader. Everyone in this room is a leader. If nothing else, you are responsible for leading yourself. And so it starts with each of us in terms of how we're showing up as people, as leaders, and I didn't show up well in that phase.
Good, thank you for sharing.
And I think, I might just add, that at any point in your career, share the stories where you just fell flat on your face, because it shows humility. People can relate to it, and the important thing is not so much that you failed, but what did you learn from it? And I learned a lot of things about how to really be a leader based on all those missteps.
So you told us about the failure or the mistake. What did you do to overcome that where you still remain employed? What were some tools that you used?
I had to dig pretty deep and to just acknowledge my, not just my humanity, but, you know, my missteps. You know, it's so easy to cast blame on others, and so that was what I was doing initially. I was casting blame on my predecessor, but I had to turn and look in the mirror. I think what salvaged and eventually made our organization a much better place to be is that they saw that transformation within me. And I was genuinely, like, I thought, remorseful, shamed at how I'd been acting.
Sure.
And really from that point on, I made a conscious, deliberate effort not to ever again disparage anyone, even though I may feel it, I think they deserve it. It's like, you know, you've got to project that positive image, that authentic self, and, you know, again, learning the lessons of your failures. And I would, in my all hands or town hall kind of forums, I would sometimes use that as a platform to explain, this is what I've been working on. And so people seeing that transparency and the irony was, you know, being in charge of the leadership development department. So I needed to practice what we were preaching to our emerging leaders.
Well, we're very grateful that you've attended this second annual STEMS workshop And the theme, as you're well aware, for this workshop is success in the game. So if we replace the word game with workforce, educate our minority students about what it takes from your experience to be successful, not only in the game, but in the workforce.
Well, first I'll go back to that grit model I described earlier from Dr. Dwana, and the growth, the resilience, the integrity, and the tenacity. You need all of it.
Yeah.
And so don't give up. Another thing that struck me from that session that I so agree with, and it applied to my own career, is your career map is not a straight line. You will zigzag, you will turn left, you will turn right, you will, what may feel like backpedaling, you will just zigzag all over the place, and I have zigzagged. Some people might say, well, you could never decide what you wanted to do when you grew up. Well, but it, a simple metaphor that stays with me is, where you are right now, you might be on the right seat on the right bus. Or you may find you need to be on a different seat on that bus. Or you may find you need to get off that bus altogether and go on a different bus. And it's a matter of experience, it's a matter of finding, I never had a job I had one job I didn't like. But most of the jobs I was in, I enjoyed. And it took me decades to find my sweet spot in talent development and talent management. I once read a book from, I don't know if you know who she is, Renee Fleming, an opera singer. And she now gives master classes because she's been in the game for decades. And she'll tell them, it took me 20 years to really get to a place where I sort of found myself. So the point of all of that is, I'm not saying it's going to take you 20 years. What I'm saying is, through grit, you will find that place. It may be next week where you find it. It may be 5 years. The point is, you're not, on some level, there's a clock ticking, but don't feel that I've got to have my dream job by 25. You're just setting yourself up for potential disappointment. Keep the aperture, keep the doors open broadly. Explore, experiment, take risks, and you can do it in a safe manner. I mean, if you're in a company that's worth their salt, or the federal government, NNSA promotes in a very robust way details, rotations, shadowing opportunities. So those are places where you can just dabble and say, I want to find out what these people who work in budget do. And you may come back running with your hair on fire, I never want to do budget ever again. But at least now you know what they do, and you have that context that now when I deal with the budget people, I can speak their language, for example. So, or you may go to budget and find, oh my gosh, I've been doing physics all my life, but I love budget. That's it. But, I was in financial management for over 15 years, and I'm not there now. And so, and it was a single conversation with the director of my agency at the time, because I was doing financial management, loved it, thought that was my sweet spot. Hey, Dave, we need to stand up an HR department because the one we have now is just totally dysfunctional, needs a lot of work, blah, blah, blah. Would you go in there and dabble with it and see what you can do? So I did this hard right into talent management, and I never left. Because I was like, oh, this is really cool. I mean, it was like in the workshop yesterday, what motivates you? It's like, I love my job. And, so it can be a hard right into something you never thought you would be interested or do. And so the curiosity, I think is really important. Be curious. You know, you're in a degree program now, you have a prescribed or defined major that has a, you know, a scope to it. And so that's a great foundation, and it's kudos to you for pursuing those degrees, because I cannot imagine, I don't have the talent to be a physicist or a chemist. So kudos to you, because you know, you've made that commitment for yourself, right? And so, you know, that is just a tremendous accomplishment for everyone in this room. And you want to pursue those goals, pursue those dreams. But again, just be curious. Keep your mind open and take advantage of opportunities.
Well, you mentioned HR, that you spent some time in a leadership role with human resources.
Yes.
And I'm
Been
quite
lucky.
sure when they have interview panels, they're looking for certain qualities and characteristics that the students bring to their interview.
Right. So, when you're applying for a job at NNSA or the federal government, or really anywhere, you want to take a very close look at that vacancy announcement. It will give you clues, pretty overt clues, of what they're looking for. And they're not going to ask you questions about your resume. They're going to ask you behavioral type questions. Describe a time when. And one of those questions that I sometimes use is describe a time when you failed at a project or you were not initially successful. And we use what we call a CCAR format, CCAR, challenge, context, actions, and results. So describe the situation, the context, what challenge did you face, why did you not succeed, what actions did you take, results, and what did you learn from that? That's the golden nugget thereafter. What did you learn from that incident where you did not initially succeed? They'll ask, talk to us about your interpersonal skills. So you don't ever want to not know what interpersonal means.
Right.
They want to know, and give us an example of how you work well with others. And so you'll need to actually pull in on the fly, you know, some of those examples and some of those behaviors that you exhibit. And they might ask you, what are some of the skills that you're currently working on for yourself? You may not have mastered, but you're working on. And, you know, the only wrong answer is, I'm not working on any. Or, I've mastered them all. Oh no. Because we're all continually learning and growing, and, you know, it's just a lifelong journey. And so they'll, again, ask you to describe a time when. So you want to have game on. Again, you've dropped the bags, and you're really, the thing that's always been uncomfortable for me in interviews, but you just need to get over it, is you're selling yourself. And, you know, we all have degrees of modesty, but that's not the time for it. And, you know, you don't want to come across as cocky or pompous or arrogant. So it's finding that sweet spot. So I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah.
but-
Can you talk a little bit about appearance, first impressions, and dress? Is
Oh, yeah.
that important?
Absolutely. So, you know, the way this shoe is right now would not fly in the Middle East, because you don't show the underside of your shoes in certain cultures, because that is a sign of blatant disrespect. So if I were in the Middle East, I'd be sitting like this. So it's about your posture, you know, not slouched over. As Al was talking about, the gentleman who had his hands in his pockets. You want to have a firm, resolute handshake. You know, you're not trying to crush anyone's bones. And, you know, eye contact is very important. people who have learned the science, know the science of lying in terms of what the eyes are doing. And the other thing is it's okay to pause. And that's a really good question, or that's an interesting question. You'd give me a moment.
Sure.
And when I'm in an interview, I write down notes for myself of what I want to say, and I will also repeat back the question to them. So I just want to make sure I'm answering this question. Or could you please repeat that question? Some people who are conducting interviews don't know that when they ask a question, they've really asked 4 questions at once. And so you got to break it down into chunks. And so appearance,
Sure.
again, the posture, the eye contact, the tone of your voice. You don't want to let it sink. It needs to be energetic.
Sure.
Maybe not like you yesterday, but I mean, he needs another hand for yesterday's lunch remarks. I mean, and so, it's not like, preacher on the mountaintop voice, but it is an engaging tone. It's a conversational tone. And interviews are conversations. The other thing that I think is very important about interviews is it's as much of them interviewing you as you interviewing them. A crucial technique is at the end, they will almost always ask, what questions do you have? Don't ever say, I don't have any. Again, you want to show that you're intellectually curious. So you want to walk in and ask, like if you're applying for a job in the federal government, we have what's called a Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey. And you can go online and see the agency's results about, which basically employee perceptions about morale,
Yeah.
engagement, satisfaction. Do your homework. Say, I've noted, and when I came to NNSA, their FEV scores were in the tank. And I asked my prospective boss about that. What's going on at NNSA when your ranking is very low? You also want to, and in this day and age of Google and everything, there's no reason not to have done your homework about the place you're interviewing at. So that you can talk about, at NNSA, I've read that you have these kinds of programs, here's how I think I could contribute. So again, it's your being engaged,
Yeah.
and that's being present in the interview. You have to be very present and active in the interview. It's not just you're being passive, being asked questions.
There's a big movement now throughout the federal government on this term inclusion, cultural competence, emotional intelligence, teamwork. Right?
Right.
Well, what are some of the challenges when one wants to transition their cultural values, their ethnic values, their community values, and principles into the federal government? That transition from community or home to the workforce. How does that work?
Well, I'll start by saying what I said before. It's important that you be your authentic self. That said, there are professional standards, there's conduct, there's how you comport yourself as an employee in the federal government, and there are definite areas of zero tolerance. So I talked about harassment earlier. Social media can get you into a lot of problems. In terms of, we have had people who have lost their jobs over what they posted on their social media sites because it was inflammatory, it was unprofessional, and the federal government will not condone that kind of behavior. We had one person who claimed to be out sick for several months, yet was posting pictures of vacationing in the Swiss Alps at the time they were out sick. Okay. So that didn't go over well, but you do need to, I hate to use the word temper or restrain yourself, but swearing is not permitted. You need to show up for work on time. You know, maybe you had a habit of missing the first class sometimes because you partied too late and this, that, and the other. And so it's being professional, and as you talked about, you know, cultural diversity, the workplace has never been more diverse in terms of cultural. And when we think about cultural competence, 15 years ago, it was about if you were to travel overseas, what are some of the do's and don'ts? Today, it's the person sitting next to you in the office in terms of their religious beliefs. And, you know, there are conversations that you just don't have, not just only at NNSA or in the government, but in the workplace these days. There are topics you just avoid completely, and so your best bet is to stay focused on the work. And if you do that, you'll be fine.
So as we begin to wrap this up, Dave, and come to a close, for the students who are present, for those who are listening and viewing this interview, what wise counsel or words of wisdom you can share with them that would help them to better prepare themselves to enter into the federal government workforce, where they can be a part of being a public servant and helping to make this country and this world better? Not so much just looking at their technical skills, and I truly believe they will be very proficient and efficient in their technical skills, but in their ability to be able to relate, interrelate with people who are very similar, but yet people who are very different, where they can create a harmonious relationship where it's a win-win. What words of wisdom can you share with them?
I would say it's not, I mean, we all have biases. We all have biases. And that in and of itself is not a character flaw. It's do we let our biases control our behaviors, control our interactions? And so, you know, the federal government, 3 million people. It's the world's largest employer. And so there's going to be all walks of life in the workplace. And it may, I should say, require any one of us to get out of our comfort zone of who we've interacted with in the past. And really just taking the time. I think what's really important is rapport building, getting to know the person in the cubicle next to you, and being open to the experience. We can all learn so much from each other, and we should all appreciate each other. And you mentioned inclusion. There is a book out there that came out in 2016 with that title, Inclusion. Author's name is Jennifer Brown, and her 4 main pillars of inclusion is that everyone wants to be welcomed, valued, respected, and heard. Welcomed, valued, respected, and heard. And if we can each commit to making all those around us feel welcomed, that they're welcomed into our space, that they're welcome to interact, that we value them, that there's mutual respect, and that we're hearing them, which goes back to the listening. That's just a winning recipe for everyone. If you can really embrace that kind of a model, I think, you know, from a soft skills perspective, that's a winning formula.
So maybe it's not about whether or not you're African American or Hispanic or Asian
Right.
or gay or lesbian.
Right.
Maybe it's not about that, but your ability to apply those 4
Right.
areas.
Because all of that also speaks to, again, your credibility. Do people perceive you as ethical, as having integrity? If they don't feel welcomed, that taints their perception of, are you someone I can trust? And again, the trustworthy, the credibility, the integrity, those are the coattails of on which your reputation lies.
Yeah.
And so, you know, without those principles, your reputation will suffer. And if your reputation goes, it is a long, hard journey to get that back.
And now's the time for our students to
Build it up,
build it up,
build it up.
sustain it, maintain it, be successful.
Absolutely.
Dave, thank you so very, very much for joining me for this interview. I have greatly benefited, and I hope our listeners and viewers have benefited from this conversation this morning. Thank you
Great.
so very much.
Thank you.